Hello, everyone. Today I want to introduce the American Revolution and pose a question to you. But before we get started, if you want to follow along, you can download the Brief Introduction to the American Revolution PowerPoint and also get out your American Revolution Timeline, the big PDF document. I'm going to kind of go over a little bit of that with you. But here's my question. What do we mean by the American Revolution? Do we mean resistance to tyrannical British legislation, such as the Stamp Act? Do we mean the principle of no taxation without representation? You kind of hear that one a lot, talking about the American Revolution. Do we mean the actual Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783? Is that the American Revolution? Is the American Revolution the ideals found in the Declaration of Independence? A lot of people kind of believe that. Is the American Revolution the Constitution, the final chapter of kind of building a nation? Is that the American Revolution? These are all kind of good questions, and we're kind of going to learn about this during this class. But I wanted to share two really good quotes with you from our founding fathers. They asked this question themselves, what is the American Revolution? So the first quote is from John Adams. John Adams is probably the person most responsible for getting America to declare independence. He's definitely in the top three, so really important person. He was at a lot of the main events early on. He's our first vice president, our second president, so he's also pretty important. Here's what he said. As to the history of the Revolution, my ideas may be peculiar, perhaps singular, but what do we mean by the Revolution? The war? That was no part of the Revolution. It was only an effect and a consequence of it. The Revolution was in the minds of the people, and this was effected from 1760 to 1775, in the course of 15 years before a drop of blood was drawn at Lexington. So here's John Adams. The Revolution has nothing to do with the Revolutionary War. It's everything before the Revolutionary War. So that's kind of mind-opening. Here's another quote. This is Dr. Benjamin Rush. He's also an important founding father. There is nothing more common than to confound the terms of the American Revolution with those of the late American War. The American War is over, but this is far from being the case with the American Revolution. On the contrary, nothing but the first act of this great drama is closed. So here you have two founding fathers. These guys were actually there for the years of the Revolutionary War. One of them says the revolution is everything before the war. One of them says, no, the American Revolution is still going on after the war's been won. So throughout this course, I kind of want you to think what your opinion is. What do we mean by the American Revolution? My own personal opinion is it's kind of the events leading up to the war itself, and then the culmination of the writing of and ratification of the Constitution. So I kind of date the Revolution 1760s to late 1780s. Most historians, I think, kind of see it that way too, but it's something to think about throughout this session. Okay, so now I want to talk about a little bit of stuff before the Revolution. If you get out your timeline, this is page 1. This is all I'm going to talk about today, but I just want to go over some ideas with you real quick. If you look at your timeline, you'll see the years 1607 and 1732. 1607 is Jamestown, Virginia being founded. 1732 is Georgia being founded. Georgia is the last colony. Throughout that period, all 13 colonies are established. So everyone that takes part in the American Revolution is there by 1732. Here's what I want you to remember about that time period. I got 3 or 4 main ideas. The first one, when people came to the New World from England, they brought their English rights with them. I'm going to read you something real quick. This is the charter of the Jamestown colony. So this is from the King of England, King James I. This is what it says. So any Englishman who comes to the New World shall have and enjoy all liberties, franchises, and immunities within any of our other dominions, as if they had been abiding and born within this our realm of England. So that's really critical. When you came to America, you did not leave your rights back home. You brought them with you. So English political philosophy, English law, it comes to the colonies with the Englishmen that founded them. So that's really important. The other idea I want to look at is this idea of salutary neglect. This is an important term to remember. There's a huge ocean between England and the 13 colonies. So it's hard to govern the 13 colonies. So there's this thing called salutary neglect. Basically, England, the mother country, Parliament, they regulate trade of the 13 colonies, but they don't really interfere in their affairs very often. So basically, you regulate trade, but other than that, you pretty much leave the colonies alone. So from 1607 up until the start of the Revolutionary War, basically salutary neglect allowed each colony to set up its own legislature, its own court system, its own sheriffs and law enforcement officials. The colonies had their own schools and colleges. The colonies had their own sense of culture. The colonies had their own elites, people like Benjamin Franklin or George Washington, kind of guiding society in some ways. They have their own specific economic interests that are different than the mother country and indeed different from each other as colonies. So basically, salutary neglect allowed all 13 colonies to basically create everything you need to be your own country. All the colonies also have their own militia system. That's also important. They defend themselves for the most part. So by the time of the American Revolution, the 13 colonies are already functioning as nations, even though they're still within the British Empire. They have all the things they need. So that's salutary neglect. Remember that term. I've got two events here, the English Civil War, 1642 to 1649, and then the English Bill of Rights, 1689. England went through a civil war, and basically in 1689, Parliament wrote down what rights an Englishman had. And these are all things directed against the king. The English Bill of Rights says things like, the king cannot keep a standing army in times of peace. That violates your liberties as an Englishman, to have soldiers, telling you what to do. You can't be the king and just create a court to try somebody that you want found guilty. You can't make arbitrary court systems. It says you can't be deprived of owning arms or defending yourself. The English Bill of Rights talk about you can't just cancel Parliament and cancel elections. So basically, you come here as an Englishman and you have a certain amount of rights. And then the English Civil War happens and the English Bill of Rights are written. And basically, you're an Englishman, so you're like, those are also my rights because I'm an Englishman living in the colonies. So just remember, you have rights as an Englishman that come with you to the 13 colonies. The other thing I want to talk about is mercantilism. Mercantilism is just a economic system, basically. For what we need to know about it, you have a mother country and a colony. The colony provides raw materials for the mother country. The mother country processes those raw materials and turns them into manufactured goods and sends them back to the colonies. So mercantilism between the mother country and the colony is kind of like this circle of trade. So in a way, it's beneficial to each other. If you're out in the forest of Pennsylvania, you have a lot of trees. So you cut down trees, you ship them back to England. Maybe an English manufacturer turns that wood into a really fancy coach that you can ride around Philadelphia and impress all your friends. So it's kind of a circular relationship. But the mother country is also above the colony. The mother country is in charge. The colony exists for the benefit of the mother country. So mercantilism, it's beneficial in some ways, but in other ways, it's not meant to make the mother country and the colony equal. It's meant to serve the interests of the mother country. So you can see how over time, the 13 colonies start thinking like, hey, we got everything we need to be a country. Why can't we be on par with the mother country? So that's mercantilism. You'll read a little bit about it in the Robert Leckie book. I've got some laws written down. The Navigation Act, 1660, the Wool Act, the Molasses Act, the Iron Act. From the 1660s up until the Revolution, Parliament did regulate trade with the Americans, and they did introduce some new laws that were a little more strict. Some of these laws said things like you can't sell anything unless it travels on a British ship. So let's say you're, a lumberjack in Pennsylvania. You can't sell your wood to a French merchant and he ship it to England. It has to go on a British ship. So they did regulate trade, off and on, and they did get more strict over time. But salutary neglect really comes to an end in 1763. Basically, 1754 to 1763, you have this huge war called the French and Indian War. The British Royal Army and the colonists of the 13 colonies, the English colonists, they fight the French and the Indians over land in North America. Long story made short, the American colonists and the British win. France is pretty much kicked out of North America, and everything starts to change after that war. The British Parliament starts saying, you know what, that war was really expensive. It cost us a lot of money. And it was fought, a lot of it, in North America. It's a worldwide war. It's fought in Europe, but a lot of it was fought in North America. We should make those colonists start to pay for some of that. So let's start taxing the colonists to help pay off this national war debt. Well, the colonists, they're not calling themselves Americans yet, but the colonists are like, wait a minute, we helped you win this war. We helped you defeat the French. You don't need to tax us more. We've already got our state governments, our colonial assemblies. We pay taxes to them. Our tax dollars should stay within our colony, not go back to England. So salutary neglect really comes to an end when the French and Indian War comes to an end. And that's when, the 1760s, that's when the relationship between the colonies and Great Britain changes dramatically. So just wanted to introduce a couple of those ideas. If you have any questions, post a question in the virtual classroom or shoot me an email and we can talk about it more.